What's going on, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Links and Locks podcast. I'm Jason Sobel. He's Ben Everill from Golf Bet, and we are here to break down this week's Valero Texas Open before we move on to play 18 holes and make 18 bets. Benny, it was a fun week at the match play, the last ever WGC Dell Technologies match play. I know you were there for most of it. First of all, hi, hello, how are you? Secondly, how was last week?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the match play. I'm sad to see it go for at least for the short term, and I hope that they revisit it pretty soon. If we only have a small absence, I'll be happy. But especially only if they bring in my format, which we do not have enough time here to go through, but is a much better one than what's ever been produced. Those that know, and one day I might go through it for you all. But look, it was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome to see the big names come through. We haven't always had that to the weekend. In the end, we did get an upset final, though, and a pretty dominant final there by Burnsy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that Sam Burns, look, love Sam Burns. Love the fact that he's won now 5 times in less than 2 years. Love everything about it, other than he had to go and knock off my favorite outright from last week, Cameron Young. I tell you what, I had 2 of the final 4. That's a whole lot better than I did with my March Madness brackets, Betty.
Mate, you actually did really well. I thought Cam Young was going to be at least one start off before he sort of really clicked with Paul Tesori. You were spot on saying that they'd click right away. And yeah, I thought you were going to run the table there. The only guy I even got near that point was obviously my outright was Jason Day. I am going to claim a bit of bad luck there. He had Scheffler on the ropes, 3 up through 7 holes before getting a little allergy attack or something there or thereabouts. Look, it was a good week. Cam Young's closer than ever to getting that win, isn't he? And who knows, maybe he could be the guy that surprises everyone in a week and a half's time.
Yeah, very well could happen. If you didn't have Sam Burns and Cam Young on what is already a crowded list of contenders for next week's Masters, add them to the list. I'm telling you, Benny, there are going to be top 10 lists that include 27 players because there are a whole lot of players who are playing really well going into this year's first major, and we're going to see a lot of it. We'll talk about all that next week, a very special edition of the Links and Locks Best Bets podcast next week, but we're focused on the Valero this week, and as a reminder, the Links and Locks podcast is proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 for free. All right, let's get on with it. We are at TPC San Antonio, the Oaks course, one of the longest-running PGA Tour events out there. The Valero Texas Open, the last handful of years being played right before the Masters. 1 golden ticket left, and there's a good chance somebody claims it this week. Only 8 players who are qualified for next week's Masters are in this week's field. Benny, are you going with one of those 8 for your first hole, or are you going with somebody else? You may now swing away.
Well, what I'm going to get at first before we get into this is that mentality of like the guys that are warming up and the guys that aren't. I believe that the history will tell us that the ones that are getting ready to play the Masters don't necessarily win the week before. In more recent times, we've seen some longer shots get through. And I think there's part of that is exactly that what we talked about is that your mind is at least a little bit further ahead of where you are. So when you have that in going on, you only have to be a little bit off on the PGA Tour and you are not going to beat the guys that are fully switched on. So sometimes this is a week where you might want to be a bit wary of favorites. I'll just put it that way, or guys that are big. I think there's guys like TYRRELL, HATTON and Hideki Matsuyama are 2 great examples here where not only are they big names and shorter price, but they're coming off like injury issues. Hideki once again with his neck, and TYRRELL had that wrist hand issue at the match play. How much do you want to invest on someone who A, probably thinking about the week ahead, and B, still working on some niggling injuries? So just something to be aware of there.
I'm absolutely on the same page with you there.
Yeah. So, all right, let me go to my first potential winner this week. And don't laugh, but I'm going back to someone who's let us down early this year, mate. Cam Davis. Cam Davis, 50 to 1. Right, look, he was terrible to start the year. terrible. Missed, I think, 5 cuts in a row. Has been 6th at the Players and was 2-1-0 last week. He is a ball striking machine. He's up there in par 5 scoring. These are things. It's tee to green week, by the way, if we didn't mention that earlier. You have to be great tee to green at the Texas Open. Otherwise, you're in trouble. That is his strength. And I finally had some time to sit down with Cam Davis last week and have an actual chat about where he'd been. And he gave me much more information I'd had in the past about his struggles. He was crook, sick, had a massive amounts of issues. He had some complaints and issues that he was struggling through, wasn't able to practice, was basically turning up to a lot of these events underdone, without energy. That's in the past now, and lo and behold, he started playing well where he feels 100% healthy again. So get on 50-1 while you can. That's all I'll say.
Benny, right before we press record on the pod, I said to you, I have a feeling we might have one of the same outrights this week. I'm going to talk about Cam Davis, but I'm going to save it for later in the pod. Those who are regular listeners to the Links and Locks pod know exactly what that means. Tease, 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 tease. All right. I will start out hole number 2 with a long shot than Cam Davis. I'll get back to him soon, but another outright that I like this week. We're a year removed from Ben Martin. You remember that emotional finish that he had in Punta Cana last year where he finished in 2nd place? The tears started flowing. He talked about the emotional journey it's taken to get there. Ben Martin, all he does is play very good golf seemingly every week. He doesn't get into all the big events. He doesn't play every single week, but when he plays really well. 3 finishes of 13th or better in his last 5 starts and 7 positive strokes gained approach weeks in his last 8 starts. Okay. Ben Martin is a much better golfer, I think, than most people realize. He can be had at 100-1 in some books this week. I get it. You're betting on a guy who's trying to do something he's never done before, which is win a PGA Tour event. But this week is all about stories. We'll get into some of those other stories. I know everyone wants to talk about Rickie Fowler trying to get back into the Masters, or a Taylor Montgomery, the rookie who didn't get qualified after it looked like he had a good chance of doing so. But I do think that Ben Martin would be a tremendous storyline going into Augusta at 100-1. I'm willing to take a chance on it.
Yeah, I'm just looking here too, like 19th on tour for greens in regulation. I mean, clearly he's got the game for this, right? So good spot, mate. Good spot. As I said, I like looking at the underdogs this week. And in saying that, though, I'm going to go to a guy who did win recently now for my 3rd hole for a top 5. I just think he has the game, and potentially he'll just sort of roll in and maybe sort of contend if he feels up to it. And that is recent winner Chris KIRK. 3 top 10s and a top T13 at the Texas Open in the past. I feel like, his striking's not going to leave him. He's been putting half decent. I think 5 plus 550 there for a top 5 is a guy that you could potentially say may keep the roll going.
Yeah, I like that. I've seen a lot of Chris KIRK love already so far. 4th hole, I'm gonna go with the top 5 play. And we started talking about Cameron Young earlier. Cameron Young now has 10 top 3 finishes around the world, not just on the PGA Tour, in the last 18 months. It's tremendous how many times he's gotten this close and hasn't quite gotten over that hump with a win yet. If there's a Belgian version of Cameron Young, it is Thomas DETRY. Thomas DETRY. Am I stealing one of your picks for later, Ben?
Yeah, we'll go to DETRY next. Don't worry.
Yep. Okay. Thomas DETRY is a guy who's played some terrific golf. In fact, 9 top 3 finishes on the DP World Tour, 1 already here in his PGA Tour rookie season. That was a 2nd place finish earlier in the fall portion of the schedule. 8th place last week. But I mean, a ton of really close finishes, very much like Cameron Young. I'm going with the top 5 on DETRY at around 11-1 in most books.
Yeah, mate, I absolutely love that. I really do. I think he's good across the board. I do have him down here, so I'll make my 5th hole my Thomas DETRY play, and it was actually the Bet365 player markets of where you pick better or worse in a certain position on the leaderboard. Can you believe DETRY is you just need him to be better than 47th or better for your bet there. So yeah. I think DETRY's almost, without saying, what are we, the links and locks? I think he's got to be almost a lock there. You mentioned the 2 top 10s, but 5 top 15s. He's like inside the top 30 of the FedEx Cup. He's really sort of pushing towards something big. So yeah, for me, I've got DETRY 47th or better as basically almost a lock there.
Yeah, I think that's a nice play. And those player market bets, I'll get into a few later on, but I think, as always, there's a ton of room for finding some edges in those. So sixth hole, I mentioned his name briefly, but this week is a lot about Rickie Fowler. There's going to be a lot of headlines. Rickie now ranked 59th in the world, playing some great golf so far this year. And we all know why he's playing this week at the Valero Texas Open. I mean, he said it last week in the match play. I'm here to qualify for the Masters. I'm here to get myself in. He has not played in the Masters since 2020. He's trying to get into this event. The last ticket, that golden ticket, as I mentioned, is available this week. He's going to have to play aggressively. And look, we're asking Rickie to do something that he hasn't done in a while, which is win a golf tournament. I just think that he's going to be there just based on talent level alone, on skill level, but it's going to be really hard to ask for, like, hey, I'm going there to win, and then I go out and win the golf tournament. That said, I will take Rickie for a top 10 this week at plus 210.
Yeah, I'm trying to show you my card here. My actual fifth hole was going to be, but I moved when you went to DETRY, was Rickie Fowler top 10. So at plus 210. So you've jumped in, and I'm going to go back there with you. I'm going to join you. That'll be my seventh hole now today. Exactly what you said. I honestly think that, as I said, we talked at the start of the podcast about guys who are trying to get in, guys who don't even expect to get in, and guys who are there warming up because they are in. There's all different mentality there. Rickie is motivated. He's playing really well. And I think that he will go close. And I think that'll bring great theater and storyline to the weekend at the Texas Open. But I just fear he'll, for whatever reason, might fall a couple of shots short. And that's why I have him in the top 10 as well. I think he'll go for it. He won't give up. You know, he could be 5-6 back going into Sunday, and you know he's going to have a crack. I could see him getting into the top 10 even that way. Like, he's not going to give up on this one. So that 210 was juicy for me as well.
All right, eighth hole. Let me see if I can steal another one out of the page.
You probably will.
Before you get there. It's always windy in San Antonio, at least this time of year and for this tournament. I like wind players, and one of the more underrated wind players that we saw last week in Punta Cana contending once again. I had a little outright on him. I also had Matt Wallace, so don't feel too bad for me that I didn't win my Tyler Duncan bet. Tyler Duncan, a very, very underrated win player. I'm just going to top 20 here, Benny, but plus 350 is a really nice number. As we saw, played well last week. He's not the guy that's going to go finish top 5 at a 7,600 yard soggy golf course, but when it's a little bit shorter, when the wind is blowing, he knows how to flight his golf ball, to show off a little trajectory. And so I think Tyler Duncan is a nice top 20 play this week.
All right, I'll give you my top 20 to round out the front 9 here then. And I'm going to go to a guy who proved he can play here by winning it a year ago. JJ SPAUN, T9 at the match play. I think it's only plus 150 or thereabouts, but honestly, I feel like that's the wheelhouse for this guy this week. The trying to win back-to-back is hard, as we know, but I do expect he'll play well, and I kind of feel like it's a good conservative option there. I feel really comfortable with it because of what he's done there in the past, because of what I saw at match play. Again, he was extremely good in his group, you know, taking out some big names on the way. And so with that being said, I saw that as a nice sort of easy top 20 play. JJ SPAUN have a good week as the defending champion there.
Yeah, I like that play. SPAUN obviously played really well last week, so I think that's smart. All right, before we get to the back 9, as a reminder, the Links and Locks podcast, proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 for free. All right, we get to the 10th hole, and Benny, all I can tell people is that here's a player that's undervalued across the board. I remember last year telling everyone about Sahith Theegala, and I get it.
Yeah.
If you've had outrights on Theegala, they have not paid off yet. So I get it. It's not like, you know, you're making a mint over there by betting on him. That said, I remember telling people at the time last year when he was 150, 200 to 1, hey, you might want to bet this guy. He's really good. You're not going to get this kind of price for much longer. I feel the same way about AKSHAY BHATIA.
Yep.
AKSHAY is a kid who last week in the second round in PUTNAM, he was 8 under through 10 holes with a bogey and wound up shooting 63. I mean, this kid has so much talent. 13 of his 22 rounds so far this season, sub 70 scores. Even though I like him and I will have a little investment at 130 to 1, which is just a silly number. If you're not betting that, I don't know what you're doing. And granted, it's fluctuated a little bit in different markets, but he's definitely available out there at 130 to 1. I'm going to go with AKSHAY for a first round leader bet. So even if you don't like the full 4-round investment, at least get yourself a single round investment. We saw the 63 last week. Look, he did that on Friday. He's played better on Fridays than Thursdays so far this season. Okay. There's no telling that he can't play well on a Thursday and go out and cash a big Thursday ticket with the first round lead.
Yeah, mate, I love that. I was actually on him to win there last week, so I was feeling pretty good early in the week that he might be able to get that done. But you're 100% right. He is the next sort of Tigala that is going to eventually force the books to bring that number down. So jump on what you can. And look, I'll tell you where I slated him in the 11th hole. I'll move one of mine around. It was a Bet365 special for a parlay of 3 guys in the top 30. This is 46 to 1 play. Barty is one of them, who I think can win the tournament. Ryan Fox is another who I think can win the tournament, by the way, the Kiwi, who is surprising people each time we see him. And I think you mentioned it last week. You said, this is a guy who, if you know him, you know he's good. If you don't know him, you should know him soon. Look, he's 36. He's headed to his first Masters. So he does have that in the head, like I talked about before. But I think top 30 is a reasonable scenario for that sort of mentality. He's 3 for 3 with 2 top 20s, I think, in the PGA Tour starts he's had this year. So I like him in this parlay. Now here's the rub of it to get to the 46 to 1. You've got to put in this guy who, let's see, how many top 30s has he had this season? 1, and that was at Puerto Rico. 2 at the American Express. Another one at 3 at the RSM Classic. He's only had 3 this season. I love him to death, and that's Harry Higgs. Look, I understand he's a late addition to the field, but I don't know. I'm going to run with it. I'm going to say that Harry can sort of, I guess, take the opportunity with 2 hands and maybe push it to that top 30 to do that little special. If not, if you don't like that, definitely look at Fox and Bhatia in other markets.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. All right. Next hole I had, you mentioned Ryan Fox for a top 30 as part of that parlay. I'm going to the player market bets, where they've got on Bet365 Ryan Fox listed at 42nd or better in the player markets. Again,
better.
If you like him for a top 30, you should probably like him for a top 42 as well. That's how that works. And so Ryan Fox came over here, has played 3 events so far, the API, the players, and the match play. He's been inside the top 30 and all 3. There's no reason to think that he won't also play well this week. By the way, for those in one and dones, I know you're already looking ahead to the Masters for this week. Ryan Fox, you're getting a top 40 player that you're probably not going to use anywhere else because you don't really know when and where he's going to play on the PGA Tour. Yes, he's qualified for the majors, but do you really want to use a major championship play on Ryan Fox? Probably not. Where else are you going to play him? This seems like it would make sense this week, Benny.
Yeah, and look, it tee to green guy as well, right? Like if he has a weakness, it's the odd little short putt he might miss. That's not going to be as big of a deal here. He's got to just, you've got to be good tee to green. So I love him. I love the Fox, even though he's a Kiwi. All right, I'm going to give you a long shot, which is not really a long shot because it's only 60 to 1 and usually we go big. But when you have these events close to majors, this happens. And I'm going to say that a guy that, probably should have won recently is going to be able to shake off the disappointment of not doing so and come back strong. And that is our man, Adam Schenk. I think that he can, what we saw what happened there at, where was it, in Tampa, where he was there the whole way, looked like he might be able to do it, and then just pulled that drive on 18 and ended up basically stuck there next to that tree or behind that tree. It was a shame. I loved how he spoke about it. He didn't sort of hide behind it. He was disappointed. He was happy with how he went, but at the same time, he was like, I should have won that. I want another chance. Can't wait to get back out there. He took a week off, obviously licked his wounds, and he already has a top 10 in the past at TPC San Antonio. So I think that's a decent play at 60-1, Adam Schenk.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like that range, his number has gotten so much shorter than it would have been before Tampa. And I
Oh,
get it.
100%.
Because he played really well and he almost won a golf tournament. I feel like there's not much value at the top of this board. There's not much value from 50 or 60 on down.
Yeah.
I feel like there is some value like 30 to 50. I
Right.
feel like there's some players in there where you go, all right, yeah, I kind of like them. And then maybe at 100 and higher, I feel like there's little pockets of value there where it's, you know, kind of that lower end top tier, top of the mid tier, and then later again where it's kind of the front end of the bottom tier, if you
Right.
will, that triple digit price. So yeah, I like Schenk. I don't know that I want to pay 55, 60 to 1 for Adam Schenk this week, but I think you're onto something there. I do like him. All right. 14th hole. I'm going back to the player market bets. Usually, Benny, we talk about these all looking really good. You go, man, of course he's going to finish better than that. Of course he's going to finish better than that. I finally found a fade in here, and it happens to be the tournament favorite this week. You mentioned earlier that TYRRELL Hatton was dealing with a little injury last week. He's a guy that I faded in everything last week. I know everybody was on him. There's a tell, to use a poker term, there's a tell from Hatton. And we've all seen Hatton's demeanor on a golf course. When he likes a place, and he really likes Bay Hill, he really likes TPC Sawgrass. When he likes a place, he plays well. When he doesn't like a place, or maybe when he doesn't know a place, he doesn't play his best golf. He has never played in San Antonio in the past. And so there is reason to believe that he shows up this week and just says, man, I don't like this whatsoever. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that Hatton is just maybe going 2 rounds and done. I'm going to get him at 20th or worse this week in the Bet365 player market bets. And I'm going to be very confident that TYRRELL doesn't contend for this title.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for going to the top 3 or 4 on the board and going to those market bets and doing the negative. For just as I said, because also I believe they're expecting wind and some big gusts at times and potential for storms before the weekend. And let me tell you, if there's delays in play and guys are hovering around that cut line that are playing at Augusta, you might see them come back out in that second round and accidentally, just sort of struggle a little bit on those low coming holes.
Really
like if they're not in contention, and they're around that area that they know they can't win, it gets really dodgy there, around weather delays and that sort of thing. All right, well, I have a guy who I like. It was 48th or 47th or better in that market. I also think this is where I'm going to have a throw at potentially a first round lead as well, but at 60-1. But Andrew Putnam is a guy that's just sort of been on the radar again. Look, had a pretty decent effort inside the top 40 in fairways, in greens and regulation, in strokes gained putting, adjusted scoring, and he's not necessarily done great at TPC Antonio in the past, but I just feel like he's trending to be better than 48th, and he could be one of those guys that surprises with a hot start.
Yeah, I like that. I was all over Putnam at the beginning of the year. I really like him usually on his native and preferred West Coast. He played okay. It was good. He wasn't great. I think he was better at the Sony really than in any of the quote unquote West Coast events. But no, Putnam's a guy that in general I think is probably a little bit underrated and undervalued. So I think that's a nice play. All right, into the 16th hole. There's a group bet that's available in some books out there, and I feel like this is a smash play. They've got Brendan Todd, Alex Noren, Adam Schenk, Sam Ryder, and Davis Riley in the same group at plus 275. I can get the last of those players, Davis Riley, who was almost pretty close to being my favorite outright this week. I'll tell you my favorite in just a minute when we get to the final hole, but Davis Riley is a guy that I really, really like, both in the long term and the short term. I think this could be a very good week for him.
Oh, well, you know that I've got a couple of, I like the Schenk man, but I'm not going to go against you there where it's a small group where he could absolutely do that. Absolutely could be the one to get through there. So I would love to disagree with you vehemently, but I can't. All right, after all that I've said about guys thinking about Augusta and all that blah blah blah, my other outright option is none other than someone who will be at Augusta,
Oh, come on.
someone who has played very well here before, who has won here before. I'm going with Corey Connors, 33-1 or
Knew that
so.
was coming.
Just because he's so, I'm trying to have a way to put this, but so like boring, you know, like so good tee to green, etc. And so just in that world of I play golf and I hit the ball here, then I hit it there, and I, you know, that he seems immune to the Masters think until he gets there. You know, I feel like Corey Connors will stay out of the Masters hype and won't be overawed by it or thinking about it too far ahead of time. Now, with that being said, he should be a guy who could play well at Augusta, but I don't think he necessarily will, because I think that's when the hype will get to him. So I'm going Corey Connors this week. Think there's a chance he can play well. Although as I said to you, I'm leaning further. I usually have my best at the front, at the back, and my best and next best at the front. The more I've sat here, the more I want to flip him. Cam Davis for me.
You spent the whole podcast telling us that, hey, you might want to fade all these guys who are going to Augusta next week. Usually doesn't work out. And then we get to the end and you tell us Corey Connors. I don't mind Connors. Of all those guys near the top who are already qualified for next week's event, Corey Connors is probably the guy that I do like the best. Like you said, past champion 4 years ago. He went from Monday qualifying to being at Augusta National the following Monday. He's good ball
and his
striker.
scoring average there is just is really good, 69 or something like that. So it's just hard to let him go.
Subpar rounds out of 16 in his career at this event. And the only thing I'll disagree with is that you don't seem to like him that much for next week. I actually think he's pretty good course fit for next week. He's played well. I think a couple top tens.
I think he's great course fit. I just worry that down the stretch on Sunday, if Corey Connors could close the deal. So let me make this very clear. He will be a great top 10, top 20 player next week. Even a top 5. I just don't know if I'd say you win the thing.
Yeah. All right. No, I feel the same way. This was not a take Corey Connors. He's going to win the Masters, but it's I do like him a little bit next week. All right. 18th hole, my favorite outright. If you've been paying attention, you know who it is. Cam Davis, who you've now for 2 different holes, I guess. For outright plays. You gotta put 2 outright tickets on them if you're gonna pick him for 2 different holes. I'm totally on board with this. He is plus 5,000, 50-1 right now. And for all the reasons that you mentioned, I'm not even sure I can go over them again. But yes, he was miserable both on and off the golf course for a few months there. We found out why in the Players Championship. You found out even more reasons why last week, but he now has a 6th place finish at the Players, and he went 2-1 in his group last week, made 11 birdies in those final 2 matches against Tom Hoagie and Aaron Wise, won each of those. That tells me he's right there. He was one of my favorite guys to be bullish on coming into the year. Obviously didn't work early, but I am not going to jump off now. And especially at this kind of number, this is exactly what we should be targeting. A really good player at a depressed number because the markets have yet to catch up to his skill level, his talent level, and where his form is right now. And so get him now. You won't see him at 50-1 in most events with this type of field for the rest of the year.
Mate, I was going to ask, like obviously I had a little bit more intel speaking to him. You got enough out of him at the Players to feel like he was trending. Is that what you've got to?
Yes. I saw enough from his game. I listened to him in those post-round interviews, and I also just watched him play, and I'm like, this guy who looks like the Cam Davis that we watched the last couple of years, and that Cam Davis I really liked a lot. And so now that he's back to being that guy, I'm all over him once again.
And look, I'm going to give the listeners a little bit of an insight. I'm pretty sure you might have spent some draft capital on him in your big league, right, as well across the year. And so hopefully he comes good for you, because I really do think this was supposed to be the year for him. So it was a really bad timing to be crook at the start of the year for him. But he seems to have gotten over it. I said, I always like to figure out his mental state. That's the one thing I used to worry about. That's the one thing I was worried about before he played the President's Cup. But after the President's Cup and saw how he lifted his, emotions and an ability to feel like he belonged, that is where I got excited. And now having spoken to him again, I feel like he's trending back towards that. He feels like he's 100%, doesn't have any excuses in the back of his head anymore. So let's go, Cam Davis.
And again, I think I want to make one last point here that's more of a general point, but is specific to this story right now, which is I know a lot of people out there in the industry are looking at the stats, they're looking at the numbers, they have their own models, and they say, well, my model's telling me this. You and I love analytics. We love looking at the numbers. We use them all the time. There is a definitive advantage to listening to those people who are out at the PGA Tour events and speaking with the people that we're actually putting our money on and hearing what they have to say about themselves. And so, look, I have nothing against anyone in the industry. There are a lot of people out there who do a lot of great work on a weekly basis, and I love consuming their content. But guys, if you're only making models and you're only looking at numbers and you're not personalizing what's out there, and listening to the players themselves and listening to those who are speaking with the players, you're doing it wrong. Because like I said, Benny got some very, very beneficial information from Cam Davis last week, and now we're picking him. That's not going to show up in the model. That's not going to show up in any strokes gain category. It's not going to show up on your computer screen. And so again, just very, very valuable information to use going forward.
Sweet. Let's go, Cam. Did we just force him into a miscut or what? Like, seriously?
No. I really like it this week. I really like it. I don't know that he's going to beat Ben Martin, who's my favorite long shot, but no, yeah. I really do. I like Cam a lot this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this edition of the Links and Locks Best Bets podcast presented by Bet365. Remember, you can find us anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Download, subscribe, rate, and listen every week during the PGA Tour season, including next week, big podcast. Got some special things cooked up for the Masters. I'll be there on site at Augusta National starting next week. Cannot wait. Thanks, everybody out there, for listening. For Ben Everall, I'm Jason Sobel. Good luck with all your bets for this week's Valero Texas Open. Here's hoping you hit the green.